Let's get it on. Uh, Welcome to the Winchester Book Gallery. Thank you to Christine and Patrick, the owners and proprietors and all-around awesome people. Big thanks to Christine for always being there as my partner in crime at virtually all these events, and her willingness to let us use this beautiful bookstore, help with the festivities, the supplies, etc. This is fantastic, and thank you for being you, and thank you for having this bookstore and keeping literature alive in Winchester. I am stepping in for the inimitable Ed Amar, who unfortunately had Achilles surgery and was unable to attend. So he's a pretty funny, engaging guy, so I'm not even going to try to imitate what you would have had, but I am very excited to introduce some writers and musicians. We're going to hear some readings, and then we're going to have a Q&A, and we're going to make sure there's time for some audience interaction. So let me introduce our readers. First, we have David Swinson. David is a retired police detective, having served with the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining the police department, Swinson was a record store owner in Seal Beach, California, a punk rock alternative music concert promoter in Long Beach, California, and an independent film producer in Los Angeles. Right on. Swinson is the author of The Second Girl, which was one of the New York Times best crime fiction books of 2016, Crime Song and Trigger on Mulholland Books' Little Brown and Company. He lives in Northern Virginia with his wife, daughter, bull mastiff, and Staffordshire Terrier. Probably not in that order.
Unfortunately, Buster passed.
Oh, okay.
He can still be mentioned.
Okay. In memoriam. And our second reader is Christina Kovac. Christina worked for 17 years managing Washington, D.C. newsrooms and producing crime and political stories in the district. Her career as a television journalist began with Fox 5's 10 o'clock news, and after that, the ABC affiliate in Washington. For the last 9 years, she worked at NBC News, where she worked for Tim Russert and provided news coverage for Meet the Press, The Today Show, Nightly News, and others. Christina Kovac lives with her family outside of Washington, D.C. The CUTAWAY is her first novel. These two writers are going to be joined tonight. I'm so excited I can't even contain myself. We've got two amazing musicians that are going to accompany them. So we're going to turn this into crime scenes and cocktails with music. Our first musician is Sara Jones. Sara was born in Thailand and raised on the eastern shore of Maryland. She began performing music as a pianist. She entered college with the goal of becoming a classical pianist and earned her Bachelor of Arts in Music from St. Mary's College of Maryland, as well as a Master's of Music in Piano, accompanying from the University of Cincinnati's College Conservatory of Music. She heard from a friend about an opening in the U.S. Army Field Band Soldiers Chorus, passed the audition, and spent 6 years in the Army. While in the Army, Sara entered and won the Billie Holiday vocal competition, and then Sara was fortunate to meet Paul Langosh, best known for being Tony Bennett's bassist. Whenever he was in town, I'd hire him for gigs, she says. After a time, he said I should really have a recording. After I agreed, he said that he had produced a few albums and that whenever I was ready, he'd work with me. Her album, Daydream, a little is the result of their collaboration. And Jeffrey Baldwin is a scientist at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. His interests outside of science include music. He's played violin since he was 10 years old, photography, reading, and spending time with his wife and two daughters in Northern Virginia. I think David has agreed to read first. So David, please help me in welcoming David Swinson.
Just tell me if if you can't hear me back there. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
That's fine.
Cool. Okay. Well. Hit it. been sitting on the run-down two-story row house on Kenyon Street Northwest, off and on for 8 days. That's the longest I've had to surveil a location, but it's worth the effort. I know it'll be a good hit. Lord knows I need a good hit. At least 5 Salvadoran boys are living in the house on a regular basis. All of them nothing but little big men aspiring to be hard, slinging their shit in the area 16th and Park, mostly weed, crack cocaine, and heroin. But they recently got into powder, which is what interests me most. Powder cocaine is getting harder to find nowadays. Crack is still the drug of choice on the street, and of course heroin. Then there's PCP, but that's a whole different monster. It made a comeback a few years ago. Kids are walking around in the open smoking dippers like they're regular cigarettes. The Salvadoran boys won't mess with that shit, but I've seen them hanging with someone who will, Cordell Holm. I had dealings with Cordell back in the day when I was on the job and working narcotics. He's the leader of a crew that controls most of the corners in Adams Morgan area and one of the area's main distributors. Cordell's crew usually works south of Columbia Road. Park Road is north of Columbia, so when I saw him with the Salvadorans like they were talking business, I figured Cordell was expanding his horizons. Maybe got himself into bed with one of the bigger Latino gangs that control Columbia to Park. I don't know if the Salvadorans are affiliated with one of those gangs or if they're just a bunch of orphans who got themselves adopted by the Holm family. Doesn't matter to me which scenario it is. All I know for sure is that Cordell Holm deals in weight, and that means that I have a chance of getting a piece of that today. Like I've done all the other days, I've been sitting on this spot. I watch them as they make their way out the door, usually by 1000 hours. They slide into an older model, mostly primed out four-door gray Toyota with chromed out wheels, an oversized metallic red spoiler, and home-tinted windows. A little El Salvadoran flag fringed in gold hangs from the rearview mirror. They head west, like they always do, towards 16th Street and Park Road. I've tailed them enough times to know they'll park at a spot another Latino kid reserves for them. A young boy, 12 to 14 years old. Just another kid trying to get his foot in the door and working up to something more. Another boy who always wears an oversized Wizards jersey and black Jordan Superfly sneakers returns to the car when they're low on merchandise, usually after a couple of hours. He drives the car back to the house to re-up, then returns it to Shiny. I should be long gone by the time they need to re-up, but then I know all too well what can happen. Shit, just about anything can happen. Shiny might get lucky and hook up, bring her back to the house on Kenyon, or maybe it will be a busy day and Superfly will need to re-up sooner. You can never predict, you can only prepare. I'm prepared, but I also do my best to eliminate the possibility of an encounter. No more than 15 minutes inside. You'd be surprised what an experienced person like me can do in 15 minutes. These boys, they've been running free on the streets as if they own that real estate they're working. I sit on the house for another 10 minutes after the Salvadorans pull out. When it feels right, I step out of my Volvo and slip on my suit coat, tighten the knot of my tie. I shoulder my nearly empty backpack, which contains only a few items I might need once I get inside. A small streamlight, a stun gun, crowbar, screwdriver, pliers, a box cutter, zip ties, and an extra pair of handcuffs. I look both ways and cross the street. It's about a half a block to the house. I walk like I belong. By the way, this is from the first chapter of The Second Girl, written in 2016. Thanks.
So I'm going to read, while Sarah's setting up, I'm just going to read from the first chapter in the Cutaway, and just a short hunk, and then just a little bit from the second chapter, just so you guys can get a feel for the arc of my character, Virginia Knightley, who is a Washington, D.C. producer, kind of like some of the stuff that I did. You're good? I need these, sorry guys. It began with someone else's story. A woman went out to meet a man. On a long walk, she disappeared. I didn't know the woman. I'd never met her, but I could see her in my mind. She was walking the streets of Georgetown, heels striking the sidewalk to the percussive beat booming from city bars. That same path I traveled many times. Her married name was Evelyn Carney. She'd been born to small-town country club people hailing from the cold north. I never knew much about her family, except they had no time for her, and when she disappeared, gave a collective shrug. I wondered, had she fled them, or was she like so many other young women like me, who come to D.C. with dreams of making herself anew? All I knew, I got hooked at that first glimpse of her. My mind is devilishly quick to fasten itself to an image, and I should have been more careful. I'd certainly been warned. When I was a young and reverent girl making those gestures that good girls must make, my parish priest had warned me. Be careful what your eyes take in, he said. What you see becomes a part of you. Where is love? Does it fall from skies above? Is it underneath the willow tree that I've been dreaming of? Where is she, who I close my eyes to see? Will I ever know the sweet hello that's meant for only me? Who can say where she may hide? Must I travel far and wide till I am beside that someone who I can mean something to? Where is love? Understand, my mind isn't exactly photogenic. I don't collect reams of newsprint or prose. Numbers are a completely foreign language. It's only pictures that burn a permanent place. It's a terrific gift at deadline. I can remember the angle of every frame of video I've used, where it was shot, what time of year, if there were leaves on the trees or snow on the ground, that kind of thing. But here's the flip side of that shiny coin. You can't get rid of a picture either. Not even when it hurts you. That's how I got into trouble about 5 years back. I've been working the story of a mother and daughter gone missing from a D.C. suburb. It turns out the husband refused to pay debt to some really bad guys. I don't remember those details, only what happened to the mom. I got a tip to search a park north of the city. It was densely wooded, leaves covered the tangled paths that merged into one another, and I got lost. When I finally found the crime scene tape, I couldn't figure out which side I was on. Then I heard the engine growl. About a dozen searchers circled a crane that lowered a steel drum to the sand. The drum was wet from pond water. One searcher broke the seal of the crowbar, and there was a thud as the heavy lid fell to the sand. The crane cut its engine, and everything went silent as the searchers circled the drum. I moved a little closer. The top of the woman's head was visible, the line of her scalp against the white line of her scalp against the shiny dark hair. Her body was curled inside, chin tucked to her shoulder, protectively it seemed. And then I saw what? Or rather, who? It came to me at once, the slash of the pond water outside the drum. The mother trying to scoop the little girl. I heard another echo too, that of a woman's whisper. Someone will come for us, sweetie. Someone will come. No one had come. Needless to say, I blew that live shot. That's a fireable offense. All I got was a lecture, though, this time. Get your head straight, my boss had said, or you're going to lose your job. And for the love of God, stay away from these stories that trigger you. It's 5 years later now, and I don't know how straight my head got. I tried to stay away, but I saw the picture of this girl that looked like me, and I couldn't help myself. I searched for her. Then one morning I got a tip. A bass fisherman had gone out in the early golden light and found a woman's body. The woman's long dark hair, a woman's body found in a shallow cove. The woman's long dark hair caught in the twisted reeds. I drove out to the scene. Closest I could get was a parking lot high above the water. I left my car among the police cruisers and the ME wagon. An ambulance wasn't going anywhere. I slipped on my ball cap and pulled the ponytail through the loop and climbed out of the car like I'd done 100 times before. Michael Ledger raised his hand and crossed the parking lot to me. Let me tell you about Michael Ledger. Head of criminal investigations, in charge of the Evelyn Carney investigation. Also, by the way, a man I once swore to avoid for the rest of my life, and if I saw him on the street, to cross the other way. His boots were muddy. Michael, who was never muddied. And I could smell him. When he'd been with me, he'd never worn cologne, knowing I preferred men to smell like men, for better or worse. And Michael had become a man who wore cologne to a crime scene. That helped me a little. He said, "You got here fast." I tugged down the brim of my hat and I looked away. He was still one of the most handsome men I'd ever known. In many ways, you have to understand the district is a small town, and everyone had known Michael was in love, but no longer with me long before I did. I said to him, "How do you know the body's Evelyn?" He told me about the ATM card tucked neatly in the stocking of her boot, her clothes that had otherwise been washed away, but not that boot. "Where is she?" He jerked a thumb behind him, in the river below, about 10 more yards out. "Okay, thanks," and I started off. He grabbed my arm. "You know you can't go down there, it's taped off, and even if it wasn't, the body's still there and it's been roughed up. The river did terrible things." I begged him, "Take me as far as the tape, I'll owe you." We locked eyes. His were cool and gray and narrowed with calculation. I begged him, "Any favor at all, it's yours. No expiration date." "Anything?" he said. "Yeah. Come on." The way down was steep and muddy. My heels sunk in the mud. The tall grass slapped at my jeans. In the distance, there was a sharp cry. It was the call of the raptor hunting. "It's far enough," Michael said. We were on a small clearing like a shelf above the river, and out of the pocket of his field coat, he drew binoculars and aimed them at a cove where men waded among waterweed. Several boats bobbed. A heron roosted on a tree limb above them. From this distance, I couldn't pick out Evelyn at all. "Can I use your binoculars?" I said. quick peek, that's all, then you gotta get back up. I got work to do. I got work to do. I put his binoculars to my eyes and I could see the backs of two guys from the ME's office, a bag in the water, an investigator in a thigh-high boots. And he stepped back and there was the body, or what was left of it. A bloated naked back, one leg floating, the other leg submerged. Someone pulled a reed from hair gone black with river water, and then they turned the body. It was her. I didn't get sick. This time I didn't cry. I didn't drop to my knees, though I saw what the river had done and Michael had been right. It was terrible. This time I told myself the great secret I never dared admit, not even to myself. I got into this crappy job to do good in the world, to try and help people, or figure out what went wrong so it might not happen again. And I know, maybe that's naive, it's certainly unprofessional. But I didn't care. I wanted it badly. Michael said, "Are you okay?" "I'm gonna be," I said. But first I went up. I had some news to break. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. If the sea that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountains should crumble in the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. We don't do anything? Get your back. I get to sit higher because you're tall. I'm gonna make you, I'm shorty.
I'm not gonna stand here. You want a chair?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, get your chair.
Well, then we'll be short.
Nice, that's what I wanted all along. I master plan.
I'm comfortable.
When you work in crime fiction, you're always with guys, and they're always taller. It really is bad to be a short woman. Or Laura Littman, who's taller than you.
Yeah, she is. I almost stole Laura's Deuce sneakers
Oh.
because she has the same size foot as my wife.
That's awesome.
Oh, Laura? Yeah, I know. Took their conference for me. You didn't.
Should I get another chair?
No.
Yeah, of course. We should do more of these. I like the Beatles with the music.
I love it.
I like the
Yeah, she's fabulous.
Yes, sir.
You're pretty awesome.
She is better.
Wow.
You got
So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It was a
Thank you
mashup.
guys.
That was kind of what we came up with.
You guys are just like, oh, like there's all this emotion coming out of the crowd. Yeah.
So the first question, how do you guys know each other? And how did this amazing synergy come to be?
Was it Gaithersburg or before?
I think it was before.
I think it was before Gaithersburg Book Festival, but not this year's, a couple of years. But I think we met at Wonderland maybe, or
One of these NARs at the bar.
Bar, yeah.
It's always at a bar.
We got along, again, because of that relationship that, cops can have with, the reporters, and producers are very much like.
Pains in the ass, as he wants to
No,
say.
I'm friends with a few of them.
Kidding. Yeah.
Well, did you guys run in the same circles professionally with what you were doing, or were you already retired, David, or?
I
think-
retired in 2010,
I think, yeah, I mean, I think that,
and you were more, you were national. Even though I was like, my last few years, I was with HIDA, high intensity drug trafficking, which was a national program, and I worked under DEA and ATF. I really didn't go as far as Virginia and Maryland and DC, but you were national, so we really
Well-
probably wouldn't have
well,
met on the job.
I did a lot of local news
Oh, yeah, that's
until
right.
2000, but when were you on? The department?
I was on early 90s, so
Oh,
quite possibly
yeah.
we could have
I
run
might
into
have run
each other.
into you, I just don't
I've been
remember.
on several homicides.
Yeah, I mean, I know all his bosses, so they like him. He did a good job, they said.
Oh,
Because they checked you out. If I'm gonna have drinks with this guy, I wanna find out,
Yeah, make sure he's not
Yeah,
some
is he on the
weirdo
up and up?
stalker.
Cause,
He
yeah.
writes some rather crazy books, right?
Yeah.
Was he really, that's what I get a lot, is the second girl is a guy forced into retirement quietly for a drug habit, and I retired early too, but for different reasons. So I remember one of the first readings I did, you were there with Ed.
Yeah, so I wanted to check you out,
Yeah,
before I hung out.
you know who
with
else
you.
was sitting in front of it? Judge Jenny Anderson, and the guy who was the commander of internal affairs. And like I had to say, I'll take a polygraph. This is not me, and they laugh and I say no.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, let's jump in. Audience questions for sure.
So how closely does this book parallel your experience?
So this is how you know that she's not me even remotely. Is that in the very first scene, this really hot guy who strangely resembles my husband when I first met him, like she says no, right? So like right away, I'd be like, yeah, I'll go to dinner. It's literally not a problem. Where are we going? And push the work off the. So she's not me at all, and it's so weird to write in the first person perspective, because I've had people say, oh, it must be just so easy to write a character just like you, and I'm like, she's not. She's so screwed up, and I love her, right?
But alter ego, or?
So one of the things, and in the 90s, chicks were dying right and left in DC.
Yeah,
I mean,
and disappeared.
yeah, and disappearing.
Yeah.
So it was back in the 90s.
Well, like,
DC's totally.
What was that related to?
It was just a very violent city in the
Okay,
90s.
okay.
And
And
there's, according to the DC police, to this day, there's no such thing as a serial killer in DC,
yeah.
but there were a few.
Yeah, so I was living on the Hill at the time, and and you kind of feel the menace, and then you go out to these scenes, and you would kind of see things. My very first day that I worked in TV, I think I was 22 years old. John Henrahan, an old reporter at WTTG, I don't know if you guys remember, he said, come out with me on a ride along to see what's going on. And the very first thing I went to was a suicide. He said, you have to look at this, because a journalist never looks away. And I agree with that, especially as a writer, especially as a journalist. But then what the Cutaway kind of deals with is, what is the impact of you on that? It's really important it's so important for the victim to accurately report what happens to them so they don't disappear in a second sense. You know what I mean? But then in another way, the person who tells the story carries that with them. And so that was really what the Cutaway was about. I had all these things in my head, and I'm like, what do I do with this? I got to get rid of this. And I got rid of it, and my second book is so much easier to write.
But you did, actually, you can't get away with it, because you were reading, and you did get emotional at the first scene.
Yeah.
So there is that,
Yeah.
even though it's the same with me, that Frank Marr has totally nothing to do with me, and that's a fact. I had so much fun writing them, and but there are still things based on our experience that go in there, dead bodies or whatever, and then
Yeah.
it's still there.
I mean, especially when they look like you. So, and this is just a weird human psychology thing, and it's horrible because all victims are all victims, and no one should die, and it's horrible. When you look, you know, I worked on the Chandra Levy case. This was a missing injured in DC. Yeah, you did. I worked on it from like the other side, trying to get people like David Swinson to tell me what was happening. But you know, so that was like my job for like months, and she looked not dissimilar than I did at that time, and it was really a creepy thing. And where I lived on the hill, before that in the '90s, a girl right around the corner from where I lived looked exactly like me. And so you look at these pictures of these people, and then you look down at crime scene photos of women who've been killed, and they have bodies like your bodies, and you know that they've been killed because they have bodies, and they're like your bodies.
That's funny. You know, I mean, for me, it's not the body; it's the clothing. Like when I see a guy, he's dead, and the socks he's wearing, they have like Bugs Bunny on them.
Oh, that's right.
And it's just, you know, I tear up. I mean, it's just like, you know, what was he thinking when he put his Bugs Bunny socks on in the morning? You know, he was happy. You know, or as a woman, you know, and she's wearing this nice blouse. It's just, and they're dead.
So for me, it was always like, so she thought she was going to get love, and she got something else entirely. And that's what we all look for, right? As a woman, most of us.
Well, not anymore. I'm married. And I
Good answer, right?
Same. Yeah. I'm sorry. We lost it.
Not at all. Well, and actually, I'd like you to
Totally
wander.
not.
I'd like you to wander a little more. So, I think it's an interesting topic. The whole, you know, the notion of people tend to assume that the narrator is the author. That's a typical issue. But I think with crime fiction, I think if I'm not mistaken, you both are both embracing and resisting the write what you know. And would I be mistaken in saying that on one hand, I think any writer, you wouldn't advise someone only write what you know, because of course that's first year workshop fiction. You've got to use your imagination. On the other hand, for any kind of authenticity or to be taken seriously in this genre, you have to know the ins and outs. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you are writing what you know, and then maybe departing from that or cleaving to that. And
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, like I was seriously a punk rock promoter in the '80s, and I mean, everyone from hardcore punk to like Wasted Youth, Social Distortion to, you know, alternative like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pixies, Devo, and then you know all that kind of stuff. And then I become a cop, okay, but the music never left me, and I could never, if I were still a promoter in California, I could never have written a Sexy Girl, or a Crime Song, or Trigger. It's all those years of experiences, it does come out. I mean, you don't, I'm not allowed, I don't know about you, I mean, I'm not allowed to talk about real cases, or obviously mention real names.
Right, yeah.
You know,
It's
Joe
true.
Gentile, obviously, yeah. Joe was a public information officer in DC. He would always, if I had like, I had a big case or whatever, and a lot of my cases were district, federal, he'd go, Swinson, do not talk to any reporters, just go away and leave them alone, and don't mention names if you do. And so he sort of gave me permission without giving me permission.
Yeah.
But obviously the authenticity, I think in certain books that a lot of reporters, and like Allison Leota, Assistant U.S. Attorney, and cops like J. Todd Scott, I don't know if you read The Far Empty, and his new book is getting praised all over the world. And he's a DEA agent, still working. There's authenticity in there. And it doesn't make them better than, you know, like Michael Connolly, you know, who's a reporter, crime reporter. His books are very authentic, because he embedded with the police, you know.
I mean, so I guess for me, I just try to stay in the emotional arena. I mean, I'm very boring, and I'm very happy to be very boring. I don't ever want to be, I don't ever want to have the life that my characters have. but, you know, I thought that it was worth really exploring a woman who was a career journalist, you know, to show her arc about how she dealt with, you know, kind of the demons that chased her, and how she became good again, you know, I mean, how she felt good. This book that's due in literally 12 days, that I'm hoping that, you know, that I'm going to hit send in 12 days. You know, so this is a you know, a woman whose daughter she worries about, and that comes from this feeling of motherhood, which is obviously not just me. I mean, that's like, you know, that she did something that endangers her daughter, and what does she do, and what is all the guilt, and what is the relationship, and so I mean, I pulled that from having children, which we've all had, right? But it's only, you know, but this character, you find the very distinct things about that specific character, and you know, you just get down into the granular level, and that's how they become, you know, an interesting character. Is that it's not me at all. I understood the emotion going in, and I thought, oh, why did she feel like that? You know, why did she do that? You know, why did she fall in love with this guy that, you know, was bad for her? And then why did she choose what she chose, you know, the daughter or the guy? You know, so there's like all these kind of questions that are universal questions, really, that, you know, maybe come from my background in a way, but I'm not interested in me. I'm completely
But you still,
boring.
your writing is very authentic. You know, like the Cutaway, you know, I mean, you know, a lady doing what you do, you wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have been the same
No.
if you had not done that job.
I mean,
So that's what my point is.
Yeah, like, so I've like told a cop to let me on the other side of a crime scene, and then run.
And you've done that.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I kind of, I mean, we've all done that. You know, that's why they hate
I've
us.
let Paul Wagner do it.
I know you. You know, so that's, you know, so, yeah.
Well, so, okay, I'd like to circle back on what you humbly mentioned. Christina is here with a deadline looming, so thank you again for being here.
It's so beautiful. I've never been here. It's beautiful here. I wish I could stay. I'm going to come back next year and watch it, but
For sure,
yeah.
for sure. But talk about being on deadline, and you know, we've got all throughout the day, we've had a lot of writers and aspiring writers, and you can maybe demystify and mystify the whole notion of following up your first success and the attendant pressures and
what you do to your husband, what I do to my wife.
that too.
So I mean, it's so I'm a little bit ahead of the game. I think you always build yourself a little bit of room, because it always takes whatever you think it's going to take. It's 3 times as long, right? So that's just because no matter what happens when you're on deadline, you know, a kid gets sick, a husband has to travel, you know, life happens, and you can't. You know, it doesn't matter that you're a writer. You have to tend to people that you love too. I mean, you know, so I built that in. You know, that said, it is exciting, scary. I wake up at 2 in the morning sweating. I just really want him, my agent, to say it's okay. You know, and so it's and I know you've got a deadline in a couple months, so that could give.
You're going with the same publisher, right?
Yeah.
So do you have, see, I have a weird relationship with my editor over I got another 3-book deal from Little Brown.
Who are you with? Is he-
Little,
No,
Josh Kendall.
Oh, you're with him again? Oh,
Yeah.
I love him.
And Josh just finished editing Adrian McKenzie's The Chain, and he's
He did that?
Yeah, he's a little
Oh,
crazy
I love
right now.
Josh.
But because he has a little dog. But I didn't want to interrupt you, but I mean, my deadline is February, and I'm panicking. So I don't know. Yours is in 12 days.
Writer's therapy right now?
So we had, like, my husband and I worked in TV news, so we had deadlines of like in 30 seconds. So this feels like I have all the time in the world. You know, but the thing is, you have to stay very disciplined, and you have to, no matter what, even though, you know, kids get sick and your husband travels and there's things that you have to do, every single morning you get up at, you know, the time you get up at 7 o'clock, and you write, and you do it for 5 hours, and you do it not just because you're on a deadline, but because it's the thing that saves you, right? I mean, that's why you're doing it. You're not really doing it so I can sit here and kind of, have cameras on my face or whatever. Even though I love seeing you guys, and thank you for being here, but you do it because it saves you in this crazy world. You do it because it gives some meaning to your life, and all these things in your head that you feel sometimes so lost. That's the emotional arena that you use and you write. And it's not exactly what I'm lost about, because I really don't want to bore you with my life, but I will bore you with this really interesting character's life who's so much more interesting.
So that makes me think of a G.K. Chesterton quote talking about Clockwork Orange, and he says, I'm going to bungle it, but it's along the lines of novelists invent characters that they're too cautious in their real life. They commit the acts they're too cautious to commit. I would think with crime fiction, there's a lot of room to play with that,
Yeah.
both imaginatively and vicariously, I would think.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Following up on what Christina said, I don't believe in writer's block. I don't think there's any such thing as writer's block. It's laziness. No, for me, I'm having a hard time.
Yes.
Okay, and I will sit there. Sometimes I won't sit there because I'll make the excuse. I'm gonna get on my bad boy and zero-turn writer and mow the yard, and all these things, and I make excuses. So that I don't really have writer's block, but I'm having a hard time. But I know the story, beginning, middle, and end. I know everything. So I get to that point where it becomes panic time, and I think that's what I need is panic time. And then, it drives my wife crazy, but once I get to that point, I will write 2,000 words a day,
How many?
1,500, 2,000 words a day. Yeah, that's nothing to you.
No, I'm not saying that. No, so for me, I just, I don't even remember what I was supposed to say. I only have 2 glasses of wine. I'm sorry.
Writing each day.
Oh, yeah. I think it's just so much cheaper than therapy. It really is. When I say DC therapists charge like $4.75 an hour, trust me, you can sit at your desk and you can get it all out, and if it sucks, you edit. Or you throw it away. Like my first draft of this book, I literally took it from the recycle bin. I waited for the recycle truck to come because I was so afraid someone might find it. I didn't want anyone to see it. Like, what if they stole it and thought that, I wrote it? I did write it, and it was so horrible. And I handed it to him, he threw it in the recycle bin, and in the recycle truck, and they drove away. And I was like, oh, okay, now I'm ready for, the second draft.
See, I can't do that. I'll write on top of what I hate.
What?
And I'll always keep it, and it makes me feel good because I have 20,000 more words or whatever. So the book's like 100,000, and it should only be 80,000. But I can't. When it comes down to the first draft, it's obviously I put that somewhere else. I save it, and then I cut it out. But I always have that version with the stuff I hate. Because there always comes a time where you read it again, and there might be one line.
No,
just
brother.
anything.
Bad drafts are like a first husband. Just get rid of them.
Well, that makes me think of 2 things. Maybe some other things too, but whenever anyone asks me, how do you, or when I've read about how do you become a writer, how do you become a good writer, and the simple answer is write a lot and write a lot badly. And the other thing that I find both, it's ceaselessly inspiring and terrifying is when I read, I think all writers obsessively read interviews with other writers and wanting to know about craft and secrets, and you learn that there are no secrets. But when I read someone that's supremely accomplished, I think Philip Roth was the most recent one I read, and you look at somebody like that, at that level of productivity and success, and they say something along the lines of, I have no idea what I'm doing, or each time I start a new book, it's terrifying and I feel like I'm going to be a failure. On one hand, that scares the shit out of me, and on the other hand, it's inspiring because if those folks have fears, what are we? And I think that's to your point, Dave, about writer's block. Just do it because there's never going to be a
I have a lot
time.
of fear. I'm incredibly scared. When I'm writing, because I want to write my best. And I mean, I want my fans to, and I do have some fans, I want them to like it, and I want my editor to like it. I've written several things prior to these books, and they were very police procedural. I mean, A Detailed Man got published by a very small indie press that's now defunct. And after that, I wrote very police procedural books, and they got turned down by everybody, including Josh Campbell. And so I said, forget it, man. I'm going to go outside of myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have fun.
Yeah.
And that's when I wrote The Second Girl, and I told my agent, I said, you send it to Josh Campbell first, and I want him to be a one read. And he loved it.
He sent me your second book.
Crime Song?
He sent
Yeah.
me that.
Oh,
was really good.
Cool.
He's great.
Yeah, Josh Kendall's
You
one of
said it.
those, a ton of French. I mean, I've been blessed.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing about writing, and I don't know if there's any aspiring writers in here, I've been a writer since I was 17 years old, and my life took a different path, and that path it took, one thing segued into another, into another, into another, into another, and the path I took led to where it is now, and I became a writer in my late 40s. I didn't get published until my early 50s, So it just, I don't want to depress anybody, because there are brilliant writers that get published on their first debut book in 20-something, So just write, man. I mean, that's the only thing. It's just always got to write.
Yeah,
And read.
Yeah, read.
Yeah, you got to read.
Read a lot.
G.K. Chesterton's great. He's my go-to guy.
Read everything.
I read a lot, him and C.S. Lewis, and then my other go-to is like To Kill a Mockingbird. I've read it like maybe 10, 15 times, just for inspiration,
I mean, I tell my kids, like, read everything. Look at how the words look on a page and feel the words, and I mean,
smell the book.
And even look at the elevator occupancy. Like, how did those words line up? Why did they choose those words? These are stupid words. How would you do how would you do it better? For me, I was a journalist. I was happy being a journalist. This was back when Tim Russert was still alive, and so the world has changed. And then I got stuck at a live shot, and I couldn't pick up my kids, and that was the worst thing in the world. And I was stuck at Alexandria Courthouse, and my kids were locked in daycare almost, but my husband got them in time. And I remember crying on the Beltway, just crying because I couldn't get to my kids. I was stuck at the 20th hijacker. Remember that? Zacharias Musella. He was the 20th guy that was supposed to get to the plane to hit the. So I was covering that with Pete Williams, and I was supposed to get off to get the kids, but then the verdict came back, and I couldn't get anyone to pick them up. And I called Joe, and my husband right there, and I said, "Could you save me, please? Can you get the kids?" And he said, "I'll try, but I'm on the hill," and it was really late. And I thought he would get them in time. He got them in time, and I came on. And I just thought, there's got to be a better way to tell stories. I mean, there's got to be a truer way, or a better way, or a more humane way, or a way that gets closer to like human truth than this shit. And then I said to my husband, maybe I could write a novel. How hard can that be? And he said, sure. You're like super smart. That'll be easy. But he stood beside me, and I just sat at a desk, and I worked. I tried to cut back my hours because a writer needs time. You need time, and you need. You're like an athlete. You have to get in the. You have to get in the batter's box every day for hours, and you're in the box, and you're just hitting pitches, and you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what the pitcher's throwing, and you haven't, whatever. But a year later, you'll start to see that slider or that fastball. You'll pick it up.
And then that's when you hit
and then you're like, and then the character starts talking.
Yeah, for me it's like, it is word count. For me, I get to that 20,000 word, and all of a sudden, I've figured it out. I mean, man. And sometimes, a lot of times when you're writing, I've written myself into holes, and I go, oh crap, what am I going to do now? But other times it just writes itself and turns into something totally different, and that's what I love, and that's what I love about first person. present tense, is because I don't even know what's going to happen sometimes, you know. But I love first person. But the book I'm working on now is, oh no, it's first person. But the next 2 books will be third person. I'll probably have a hard time with that.
So do you guys, any of you know Joe Fender or read Joe Fender? So he's like, I don't know. I mean, like, he's what I want to be when I grow up. You know, New York Times bestselling author. He's had movies made. But he told me a secret. And it's just, you know, don't get too far ahead of yourself in the first draft. Look for where the beats are, for all you aspiring writers anyway. A novel is too big of a thing. It's like, you know, God didn't make the world in 7 days, not really. I mean, who knows how many years it took. None of us know. But you're not going to write that novel in a year either. But what you are going to do is figure out, you know, where my character is going to go for this first beat, where my character is going to go for that second beat. You know, you break it down into easily, you know, what is the first section? How do you get to the next section? And all you have to do in that first draft is get to the end. And then when you get to the end, then you know what it's about. And he told me that, and I'm like, dude, you should charge for that. That's like brilliant. And so when I went back to, after I threw away my first draft of the second novel, I'm like, I don't have to worry about this. I just have to worry about getting to like chapter 5. And then chapter 10, and then it's so funny because when you relax, that's when the characters start to come alive and talk to you.
Thank you. I need to figure that. Because I'm having a hard time.
Drink with Joe. He just spills it.
Joe.
Joe
Oh, Joe
Fender.
Fender. I actually met him in Toronto
Oh.
with having lunch with Dan Cotton, your agent.
Oh, I love it.
And
yeah,
I was
he's been-
I was with a couple friends of mine, and they were just right
Are
there.
you coming to dance? Are you going to
Huh.
dance? Is dance going to are you talking?
Oh, my, I know, I'll never do it my age.
Oh, okay. I love it.
I love my age.
Well, I think what you guys are talking about, to an extent, is the and I think the analogy to pro athletes is apt, that nobody gets proficient at something without a lot of practice, a lot of failure, and the idea that you do kind of have a mental muscle memory of the act of writing, and you're kind of training your brain to think a certain way and be open and receptive to that voice when it comes, and then you're in that magical space between you're captaining the ship, but you're also have no idea what's going on, and I think that's exhilarating and it's frightening, but that's where the real magic can happen.
And that's when you're waking up, like Christine said, like at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. I have I have hundreds of pages of notes on it sometimes. So I like wake up and go, I don't have one of those little things, so I'll turn the flash, not the light on. All of a sudden, sorry, I got it, and then I'll just get there, and I'm too lazy to get out of the bed, go downstairs and do it. But because then by that time it'll be gone.
And then of course you lose the notes. If
Yeah.
you're like me, right?
No,
They
why?
go on there.
Yeah, I'm pretty good with my notes because of my OCD.
So were there any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
I was just wondering, since you deal with crime, is the crime in real life better than what you can imagine, or do you base any of your crime in your books on things that have actually happened?
So like for me, crime is really about freedom. Like, so I'm sort of obsessed with like women's freedom. So a woman who is harmed, her everything that she is taken away. That's a total loss of freedom in her voice, and everything that she was is gone. And so, I mean, I can't, and Dave could probably tell you better than I how many women have had that freedom. They're just so, and I'm not even talking about just murder, but the myriad of other things.
Even the post-mortem stuff that happens afterwards.
Yeah, it can be really rough.
Awful.
Yeah. So as a woman, I think that the crimes are worse. I try not to make in my books graphic, but I try to always remember what it means to be a woman and what it means to be free and how hard it is. So, in this kind of very violent world that I built in the CUTAWAY. Now, my second book is different. So, I'm just still stuck in, I hadn't read that scene in a while. I started getting emotional. But, but yeah, so that was all about, someone's voice being taken away, everything that they are taking away.
I mean, for me, if I wrote a lot of what I've seen, people would not believe it, you know.
Or want to read it.
In fact, we took our friend Tim out to dinner, and Tim was telling stories as always about, he's a forensic computer guy, but he was on the street for a long time, and he was talking stories, and you just like, that, you know, if I told you that story, you'd say, come on, man, you just made that up. There's no way that's real. And you know, things on, I think the closest to reality that television ever really got to crime is The Wire, you know. But I can't be that authentic with describing, and I don't want to, describing a dead body. It's enough just to put certain little things in there, because some of the things I've seen are, you know, are horrific.
What about Crime Song, Grandma?
Well, that is, it's,
That was-
that is based on a search warrant I did when I was in narcotics, and how they kept their grandmother, and they took over her house, and she was in, you know. So I did, that was pretty horrific, and people, you know, told me, thanks a lot, you know. I got a lot of emails that said, you know, I was eating dinner and I got to that scene. But, I mean, these guys really did keep their grandmother, who was bedridden, and she had she had a shit bucket, literally, Home Depot orange shit bucket, with the toilet seat that they took off of the other one, because she couldn't walk to the toilet, but it was full, you know, and so there's certain things that's just, you know, and like what Christine said, is, you know, I had to get that out of me, but you know what? I was Frank Marr getting that out of me, because Frank Marr went berserk on those kids. And I arrested the kids, but I didn't go berserk on them, because then the case would have been thrown out, and, you know, they'd be back on the street. But I would have loved to gone Frank Marr on them, you know.
But the violence has to serve the larger,
It
the
does,
logic of the
Yeah.
story, you know, the arc of the character and how that affects the character, and it has to also preserve the dignity and the character of the victim. So I think, so that's why I restrain too.
Yeah, and the thing is you know, Frank's a good bad guy, bad good guy. And, I really was a little fearful, but people liked him. He was very likable. They rooted for him, and that's what made his as a violent character. You know, and what are the TV? I mean, he's not a Dexter, but you know, Dexter, and then who else?
He's the Shield guy.
Huh?
The Shield guy?
Guy. Yeah. And you know, so that you know, some of that is real. Mostly in the early '90s, '80s, and you know, occasionally nowadays. Well, more than occasionally. But yeah, there's bad cops.
Yeah, sure. Bad journalist.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm just curious, with both of your backgrounds, do you find that your backgrounds kind of stifle your creativity a little bit? Because you know the procedure, so is there a time that you want to go down a road, but you know that's not going to be authentic, so does it
Sweetie, I am
ever...
so far gone from TV. I can't even tell you. I can't even remember. It is such a different world out there now. I couldn't write a newsroom right now. I worked during the last Obama administration. I haven't come, and I'm very happy. You know, I mean, and my next character is a female police officer, and she's a daughter who's a photographer for news, and I'm so happy to be outside the newsroom.
I'm one of those guys you don't want to go to a crime movie or see a crime show with. Well, I drive Catherine crazy. I go, that doesn't happen. Get your finger off the trigger, you idiot. You're going to shoot yourself in the ass. You know, I mean, so no, I want to stay true to procedure. But there's certain police procedure I can't, and according to general orders, I can't give up because it's, you know, secret. But the real
As a
procedure.
former FOIA person, I understand what you're
Okay.
saying.
So, former what?
Or Freedom of Information Act
Oh,
person
okay.
on,
Yeah,
like
but I mean,
your techniques?
I want to be
Yeah.
true.
yeah.
So I'm not gonna, you know, Frank was a former cop, I'm not gonna do something that, you know, a cop wouldn't do, good or bad. I think you had a question?
Yeah, as authors, why do you think the crime genre in books and shows, why do you think it's so popular? I read one critical study one time that theorized that, especially as women readers, we like to exert a kind of control over violence that we might not have control over in our real lives. Why do you think it's so popular?
Because I don't want to lose what came in. You know, a very famous literary author, John Banville, who won the Pulitzer for The Sea, and wrote a book of evidence, not crime fiction at all. Changed, he said he wants to, and he sort of was blacklisted from the crime community because of what he said. He said, you know, I write literature, and I want to get into mysteries. How hard can it be? And so, but he changed his name to Benjamin Black. I mean, it was in the Washington Post somewhere. Crime fiction is, you have to go back. I mean, crime fiction only became like, I mean, back in the day you had like, you know, all the crime writers, but then again, if you take like To Kill a Mockingbird, if that were published today, Amazon would break that down to YA, suspense, thriller, court suspense, mystery, and everything. And it's literature, it's books. Now, I'm not saying my books are literature, but, you know, I mean, crime fiction can be, you know, literature. And, but what you asked something that I totally forgot.
Well, it's just such a violent topic, and a lot of
and
people you would think
yes.
would, you know, shirk away from it. So what do you think as a whole, as a humanity, makes it so popular?
So you know what I really, or at least what I think everyone gets out of books, something that's distinctly personal. But I think as Americans, our culture is particularly obsessed with freedom and power, who gets to talk, who doesn't get to talk. And crime is uniquely geared towards that. You know, when you're dealing with, you know, a person who wants to silence another person by killing them. I mean, this is the ultimate way of taking away their freedom. And so I think that, and also women, you know, we've as a female writer anyway, I mean, I love female writers of crime fiction because they really understand the nuance of, I don't mean to get all feministy here, but of being kind of silenced or trying to please people. I'm trying, you know, I want to talk. Oh, you're talking. You know, there's this constant, there's this not wanting to assert myself, and when you don't assert, then the perpetrator is able to. So there's this kind of, and it's also very much like fairy tales, right? I mean, we learn fairy tales as children, so we learn like how not to die, basically. Right, so Ring Around the Rosie is basically like don't kiss someone with smallpox. I mean, that's really all it was. You know, and so I think a lot of that is why women, because we're victims of people usually who love us. We're victims of people who we're close to, neighbors, husbands, boyfriends. And so it's almost like when you watch the Discovery Channel, it's like 7 ways the Earth is going to blow up today. I mean, like how awful. But you know, I mean, in a way, it's just us just trying to figure out, you know, okay, if the worst came, what would I do? And I think it really it talks about that anxiety. And when you're able to talk about it and work through it through a character, you might feel a little bit better or stronger
And I
yourself.
think readers like it because they can get outside of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why right now the big thing is crime podcasts are becoming incredibly popular. And I just got an email just the other day from Investigative Discovery asking if I would do like a new thing that they were doing. And I'm not into it. But I mean, Investigative Discovery is huge internationally. I mean, people, it's not just today. This time, this goes back, you know. I mean, to, you know, I mean Jekyll and Hyde, and Jack the Ripper, and you know, and Truman Capote's book, yeah, in Cold Blood. That became like, that changed everything. You know, when people read that, it was narrative nonfiction, and they were so brought into that world, it was frightening. So I think people, it's for the same reason, you know, people want to go see a scary movie or an adventure, you know, or something like that. It takes them into a world that they don't exist in and have never experienced.
How do you get a 3-book deal?
Just blessed. I don't.
You have a
know.
very
What?
good agent.
I have a good agent, but
it's based on sales of your.
It's based on sales. It's based on I got highly criticized. I say highly criticized. I got a lot of critical stuff, and in the first book, and a little bit in the second book, and oddly enough, it's starting to happen in the third book very late. But mostly it's if you get with the right publisher and the right editor, and sometimes it takes time. I mean, you might get your first publisher and it's a nightmare, okay? And usually it is a nightmare. Ask any author. I mean, you know, they have had nightmare publishers where no publicity, they just throw the book on the wall and see if it sticks, you know? And it doesn't stick because they don't put anything into it. So I was lucky that I got a publisher that is under the umbrella of Hachette and Little Brown, huge, but they want to be small. But they have bestsellers. They have Robert Galbraith, who's J.K. Rowling, they have everybody. And I have an editor who, and they want to grow their writers, you know. So I was just lucky, you know, because I could have easily gotten with, I'm not going to mention any publishers, but with publishers where I hear from my friends, it's just a total nightmare. So I got a 3-book deal because my first 3 books did well for them, and they want to groom me and you know, brand me and all that kind of stuff. And if I had sold 100 copies of each book, I don't know. I don't think that would happen. So selling books, but then again, that's not true. Like Jonathan Lethem, you know, he wrote Motherless Brooklyn and The Feral Detective. He doesn't sell a ton of books, but he wins every award in the world, the Man Booker and all this stuff. So publishers want to keep people like that on. You know.
Well, you mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird several times, but Harper Lee never wrote another book.
That second book should not have been published. You know.
Well, yeah.
It should not.
I mean, but she wrote it before.
Yes, but she was. What I hear, you know, from publishing friends about her is that not only her. I mean, the dude who wrote Catcher in the Rye did the same thing. Yeah, I mean, they wrote something that got so critical, and it was just like millions of people at that time wrote it, and it blew them away. And how can you like go like, how can I do better? I'm not going to do something that people are going to hate because I wrote this, but they kill themselves inside, and it just you can't write anything else because, and Harper Lee did. I don't think it was before, because it was.
She wrote The Set of Watchmen.
Before. Honestly.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the
I didn't know
publishers
that.
rejected it. They said, this will never work. Why don't, and then
So that's
they
this her
suggested
fear.
to bring in the children, and
Yeah,
so then she did To Kill a Mockingbird.
yeah. I mean, that whole thing was wrong publishing that book.
But for like new writers and even young writers or even like writers that maybe I only have like a 2-book deal, I don't think about the deal because
Yeah.
what you really don't want to do is get to like the Bryce Harper situation where you get like this huge deal and then you suck.
Yeah,
right?
will ruin
That's
you. You
horrible.
like get $1 million or something like that. That actually
So
is
even if
very
you,
bad for
so,
the industry.
yeah, even if you get a deal which sounds on the face of it really great, you don't even think, all that matters is you at your desk every day. It's an intimate thing. It's as intimate as your marriage, really. It's just you and this character.
Well, you want to be published.
Well, of course,
Yeah, I
right,
mean,
but
you
I'm
wanna
just
keep
saying, like,
writing, so-
but
But
like,
you don't put
that's
the money
later.
first. You don't.
That's
you don't,
later.
Yeah. I mean,
You can't think too, I mean, you can't let it, it's just, it's such a head.
you know, and don't. You know, I'm blessed to be retired with a pension and have a wife who loves her job and still works. And, you know, so I mean, I don't have to write for money. I mean, but I would never, like, if I were younger, and I guess if I were younger in 20s, I might work at a McDonald's and deal right. But I mean, but when you get to be, you know, a little bit older and stuff, you know, don't quit your job and think that, you know, it's gonna happen. You know.
I mean, the great thing is just writing. That's all it is.
Don't quit your job, and the great thing is just writing. I think we can leave it on that note. David, Christina, Jeffrey, Sarah, thank you so much. Amazing.